Content warning. This podcast episode contains discussions of a sensitive nature that may be triggering for some individuals.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast in partnership with Kidney Care UK, sharing faith, knowledge, hope, and love.
Hi, and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. My name is Dee Moore, and I am a kidney warrior. This podcast is dedicated to encourage, educate, and inspire as we explore all aspects of kidney disease, related chronic illnesses, and health. In today's episode, I am bringing you a kidney warrior story. Now, there's always something you can learn from someone's story, something that can bring inspiration and hope. My guest today, joining me for this special Black History Month episode from Florida, USA, is Mo. Mo shares an extraordinary journey that began with what seemed like a simple illness, but simply became something far more serious. His story is one of courage, awareness, and hope. A reminder of how quickly life can change and how powerful resilience can be. What happened next is something none of us would ever expect. Stay tuned to hear Mo's incredible story. Hi, and welcome to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. How are you doing today, Mo?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm really looking forward to our interview today. And everyone knows what I'm going to say next because I say it every time. But I do sincerely mean it when I say that I love recording Kidney Warrior story interviews. Why? Because there's so much you can learn from someone's lived experience with CKD. People have been there, worn the t-shirt, know what it's all about. Yeah, so I'm really excited to interview you today. And from all the way the other side of the pond, it's also nice to have an international guest to share your story today. So welcome.
Thank you. Absolutely. I love it. I don't even need a passport for this. So this is dope.
Without further ado, I'm going to ask my first question. And my first question is, how did your kidney warrior journey begin and how were you diagnosed?
Oh, okay. So I was diagnosed after fighting a bout of pneumonia. They ran my blood tests and they, came up to me like, not only do you have pneumonia, but do you know that you're stage 4 at that time? And that took me aback.
Wow. So you had a very serious illness, pneumonia. We know that can lead to hospitalization, things like that, very serious condition. But then you get this news out of nowhere, a kind of matter of fact, by the way thing. Oh, you've got stage 4 kidney disease. So when you found out that you had kidney disease, it was at quite an advanced stage. Did you have an understanding of kidney disease, that stage 4 was very advanced? I mean, how did you feel? How did you respond to hearing that news?
Yeah. So honestly, at that time, the only thing that I had to roll off of was, I guess, a childhood understanding of what, kidney disease was, which was stemmed from someone who was going to dialysis. I saw him from time to time and heard dialysis being flown around or just being mentioned a lot. And then at some point, I found out that he passed away. So my only connection to CKD was knowing that's backstory. And so when I was diagnosed at stage 4, whenever you hear something stage 4, you always know it's super progressive, right? And so I just ended up thinking, okay, stage 4, that means dialysis. That means I'm going to probably pass. And so that made me feel very terrified, considering some other stuff that I handled in the past as well, as far as my health. To hear that CKD came into the picture now, I thought this was the one that was going to take me out. So a lot of mixed emotions, a lot of fears, considering I had a toddler who was only 2 at the time, just becoming a father. So it was quite the experience, I would say.
At this point, did they make a plan in terms of managing your CKD to see if they could turn things around or stop the progression of CKD? What did they say next?
As soon as the diagnosis came, I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? Do I just drink more water starting now? One of the nurse practitioners actually name dropped the specialist named nephrologist. It was the first time that I heard of a nephrologist, you only hear about primary care, primary care. You know, that's all that's drilled into you. I think my wife, who was super instrumental in that, started reaching out to nephrologists all across of northern Florida where we live. She ran into a nephrologist who actually got me into the med management for blood pressure. Because mind you, I was taking some blood pressure meds, quite like 5 of them. But he got me down to like 3, and he wanted to do a biopsy. So his whole plan was to figure out what was causing my blood pressure to be up, because that's where it stemmed from, malignant hypertension. What was causing my blood, because my blood pressure go up, it was super high, 230 over 110.
Whoa. Wait. 230 over 110. I mean, that is super, super high. That is a miracle that you didn't have something even more serious like a stroke. How on earth did you manage when you had such high blood pressure?
If I can be honest with myself, I think there was a level of negligence that I had to play into that too. Because I remember back in college, I went to go visit a clinic at our university, and the doctor there, mentioned, "Hey, you might have some bout of pre-hypertension. You might want to look into that." And when you're young, you think you're invincible. You might go out all the more. You might drink certain things. You might even eat certain foods and probably not work out as much. And I think that was my case, to be honest. So I think after a while, my body just compensated. It was just used to running at that high level. And mind you, I didn't feel any symptoms. I didn't feel lightheaded, no headaches. I didn't feel dizzy or anything like that. But every time my blood pressure was ran, they saw those numbers and it was immediate emergency room. And I'm just like, I'm fine, guys. I can go home. Like, no, we're going to watch. You're going to make sure this blood pressure comes down, because they didn't want to be held responsible. And I get that. But that also kind of played into a lot of like emotional psyche, insecurity stuff as well. But yeah, my body compensated. I mean, and that's the remarkable thing about the human body. It'll do things for you, but then at some point it'll stop when it can't anymore, you know?
On reflection, when you look back, do you see that you actually had symptoms of CKD, or did you not have any symptoms up until that point?
Yeah, I think, definitely started noticing some symptoms of CKD, like the typical leg swelling, which signifies the fluid retention. I mean, me getting pneumonia, a fluid buildup in the lungs, like why isn't the fluid just leaving my body? So there's somewhere I was storing up fluids, and I had doctors say so many other things that could have been it, and it might have been true. But I think the fact that there was like edema that was super unpleasant to have, especially when you have to start wearing compressions and you have to do all of that stuff, and you can't show your legs anymore, because you got nice calves. Calves are not there anymore because it's now filled with fluids. There were signs for sure. Outside of that, all the other symptoms kind of came after the diagnosis. So yeah, there definitely was.
So what kind of symptoms did you experience after the diagnosis?
Oh, I would submit that I think the biggest one was, I think the fatigue level. The fatigue level was real, especially after my huge kidney episode. The fatigue level was there. The foamy void in the toilet looked like I just dropped a whole bunch of liquid soap in the toilet. They just foamed out. And I was just like, what is this? And I know this might be a little TMI, but I was reading somewhere where it said that the urine would start to give like a ammonia type smell. And I would start to smell that. It was a completely different thing. I would start to urinate more at night. Muscle cramps? My goodness. I mean, it had me in a chokehold most of the nights. I would try to sleep and they would come in. And I would say those were the milder symptoms. But then I can get into the other stuff later on. But yeah, those things were the first red flags for me as far as like, yeah, this definitely is CKD.
So you mentioned that you got a nephrologist. So what was the plan? What did he say at the beginning?
Big ups to Dr. Hayes. We walked into his office, and at that time, me and my wife, we've already done a lot of our research on what this thing is. Can it be reversed? Can I be cured from it? And the resounding answer was no. So when I walked into his office, he came in as all doctors do. They come with the, educational pamphlet. Like, yeah, so this is the kidney, and it has nephrons and da da da. And then at that point, I just stopped him. I said, look, we've been through the, rodeo. We know what this is about. We found out it's my kidneys. The blood pressure's up. And so after realizing that he might as well just cut straight to the chase, he called the nearby hospital, asked to get a room ready for me that I was going to be admitted. And when I got there, his plan was to, do blood pressure med control and to get a renal biopsy to see what is going on in my kidneys, because it's just my kidneys were screaming at me at that, if you can imagine. It's like the slightest movements I would do would just spike the blood pressure and it would just stay floated.
A lot there for you to cope with so early on in your CKD journey. So how did you cope with all the different things that you were having to deal with and come to terms with?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy simply because at that point, I think my mortality was at hand, because this is new territory for me. I've never navigated. My parents never had this. I don't know of any relatives that had this. It's like I'm the lone wolf now, having to look at myself and see like what would this hold for me in the next. At that time, I didn't know, next couple months. I was super terrified, knowing that I'm under medical care at that point. I was still restless because I'm over here thinking about my job. I'm thinking about my son, the potential of him growing up without a dad, my wife who's gonna be left raising this kid, my son, being left raising him. A lot of emotions. I thought about my friends. I thought about like everything. I would say those are dangerous waters because you start to turn everything on yourself. This is my fault. I could have done better. I could have drunk more water. I could have been more proactive. And so, it was a lot of internal conflict. I truly felt like the world was fading away from me because of this diagnosis coming into the mix. I didn't like it. I knew, like, and me being from the culture I am, you think about who's going to be talking, and what they say. Mind you, I was unhealthy. I was at an unhealthy weight, and I was just thinking about the people who were going to say, boy, God, put on so much weight, that one day, or he put on so much weight that now his kidney.
Please translate for the listeners that don't understand Jamaican Creole.
I do apologize. He put on so much weight, and now his kidneys are affected, and that kind of slander, that negative talk towards my character, and it was devoid of who I am and what I was trying to do for my family. At that time, I was doing everything that I could. I had lost over 100 some odd pounds. I was eating better. I ate better at that time than my whole entire life, eating berries and all the things that they show on the commercials, and yet the weight went down and so did my GFR. And so it was that confusion, that ultimate confusion for me at that time.
That must be very difficult when you're really trying to do everything that you can, but it doesn't seem to be paying off and your kidneys are still declining despite all that effort. What were the findings of the biopsy? Did they actually finalize on a diagnosis or on a reason why your kidneys were failing?
Right. So again, the whole purpose of the biopsy was to see what was going on in my kidneys that caused the blood pressure to go rackets all the way up. And so what they ended up finding was that, because it was the left kidney that was biopsied, they found that out of the 9 nephrons, 5 of them were burnt. And so it didn't have much to filter off of. And so that left them to wonder what was going on in the right kidney as well. And just quick detail, that right kidney had a mysterious mass that's just been lurking in there at that time for the past 3 years. And we never knew what it was. I tried to get MRIs done and the machines were always down. It was always down for some weird reason. So we never figured out what that mass was. But that left kidney that was biopsied was just struggling to filter based on those samples. And so his next phase was to get me over to one of our biggest hospitals here in Florida, Tampa General in Tampa Bay, to see the Moffitt Institute, which is like an institute that diagnoses like certain conditions in the kidney, or if it's like an oncology. They were ultimately testing for atypical HUS, which is I guess a condition that causes the kidneys to spike blood pressure and imbalance the hormones, which causes the blood pressure. They wanted to see if I had that. If that was the case, I would have been put on meds for the rest of my life to control that, to get the blood pressure down. And so we ran all kinds of testing. I mean, all of it. Just think of any oncology, all the testing, they ran that. And so everything came back negative based on their findings with the negative results. from testing from the atypical HUS and all the other things that might have caused my blood pressure to be up, it just dawned on me that maybe it's not so much so with the school of thought of, melanated folks having high blood pressure all the time, that it's genetic. Maybe we might have that predisposition, but I think what determines whether it's activated is our lifestyle. How much we are active, how much of a certain thing that we put into our bodies that can escalate the blood pressure findings. If lifestyle and how we, if we control what we eat is the determining factor, then maybe we can put a stop to, not holistically, but I think we can put a pause on that thought that melanated folks always have high blood pressure, whereas it's what we do with our bodies and how active we are.
So to that point, what advice do you have for anyone listening in terms of taking care of themselves?
I would say definitely make it a priority. You only get one body, one temple, one functioning machine to navigate this planet. Also being mindful of how stress can contribute to your body. I mean, I remember one time someone said that stress is the mother of all illnesses. Me, in particular, being a classroom teacher, that job is super stressful. My gosh, when you're dealing with parents, paperwork, students, it can take a toll on you. And then you have your own personal life to navigate as well. Stress can do a lot, and being mindful of the work-life balance. And within that work-life balance, you want to be mindful of what you're doing to your body as far as taking care of it. It doesn't have to be, and I think a lot of times people think taking care of yourself means you're running marathons all the time and you're eating everything green on the planet. Not necessarily. It's just balance, bringing balance to yourself, always coming back to center. I think that's the most important thing as far as taking care of yourself, and even mentally too. So, yeah, definitely balance.
So returning back to your story, so you said that you lost over 100 pounds, which in English money is 7 stone. There we go. Which is an incredible amount of weight to lose, and congratulations for that. So what happened next?
So after getting the testing done, I started meeting with the nephrologist at Tampa General, and they did some abdominal scans and they saw that mass in my right kidney. And so their plan was to get urology in on board to kind of see what is going on there too, because I never got answers from before. So now I was finally going to get some concrete answers. And there's a particular period while at my hospital stay where the nephrologist was letting me know that, hey, look, urology is not here. It's Friday afternoon. They're going to be back on Monday. You can go home, which is an hour and a half drive, or you can stay at the hospital over the weekend and see urologists early Monday morning because they're going to be in. And I said, sure, but let me talk with my wife. We'll go ahead and we'll make our decision and we'll let you know. He walks out the room, and as soon as I have another question, I went to motion to ask him, hey, come here, I have a question. That's when the first juncture of my renal episode really took off. My left kidney that was biopsied had ruptured. And if I can describe it, it's like a little kid holding a balloon and then you taking a needle to it and just jabbing it, that initial pop. That's what I felt on the inside. And when I felt that, I froze. It was almost like my mind went numb. And I was just thinking to myself, what in the world just happened? And when I turned down to look at myself, that's when the avalanche of pain just kind of like cascaded all over my mind. Like I completely blacked out. Like imagine like a grown man, bearded, screaming in the hospital and can't articulate what just happened to himself. Nurses are rushing in. My wife is terrified and I'm screaming. So they immediately give me pain meds for the next 16 hours to kind of curtail what was going on. Like it was so bad. And I always tell this part, like I was literally banging my head on the bed railings because of the pain. It was so intense that it kind of distracted the pain receptors that was going on in my left side. Me banging my head kind of took away from that. And it felt better than what was going on with the rupture. And at that time, I didn't know it was a rupture. I thought I was constipated. That's the funny thing. I thought I was constipated. And I was asking for all kinds of colonoscopies to be done to kind of flush out everything. They were giving me laxatives, and I was just further backing up my system. So that was intense. Those signs of sleep. I mean, they gave me some really strong medicine for me to actually get some sleep because there was no way. I mean, I was getting fevers. The pain would like I can't imagine childbirth, and I don't think I want to after that episode. And not knowing what was going on, I mean, the left side of my abdomen swelled up super big. My feet, I was talking about edema earlier. Forget it. I couldn't even put on flip flops or sandals. My feet were just like super big, and I didn't understand what was going on. And so that was the first big bout of what happened with my renal episode.
So didn't they do an MRI scan or a CT scan to see what was going on?
Yeah, I think at first they were precautious about it because they knew I had stage 4 CKD. They weren't sure if it was really just constipation or if it was just maybe something else going on. They didn't want to rush into it. And I can't fully articulate their reasoning behind waiting for about 16 hours. And to be fair,
16.
16
Wow.
hours to be fair because there was so much other stuff. They had to manage the blood pressure too. The pain was going on, so they were trying to manage the blood pressure. They were trying to see if it really was constipation to see if I can do the number two. They were trying to see that. So there was so many moving pieces going on at the same time that they didn't think that the kidney had ruptured. It's when they saw that they've exacerbated so many of the options. They were like, there's no way this can still be a blood pressure issue or even a constipation issue. Let's go ahead and do an x-ray and a CAT scan of the abdomen to see, what is really going on. So, they're bringing me downstairs out and bumps and, rolling down on the gurney. I have to move around. They're taking shots of my abdomen and they come back in 30 minutes. And this doctor, he puts everything up on the screen. He said, hey, we need to talk now. And he's showing me everything. I'm looking at the x-ray. The right side of my abdomen looks perfectly normal, except for a swollen right kidney now. But then my left side, where the swelling was, just gray, foggy area. And I asked him, like, what is all that going on? He said, that's blood in your internal cavity. He said, what we believe has happened, your left kidney has ruptured. And at our calculation right now, with the amount of blood that's coming out, you probably won't make it in the next 2 hours. So we have to get you into surgery stat.
What?
Yeah. I mean, talk about like going from, oh my gosh, I have CKD. What does my future look like? To 2 hours? Like, what do you, why? What do you mean 2 hours? Like, and they were super efficient. As much as the 16 hours, they took really good care of making sure that I was comfortable and just trying to figure out what was really going on. But when they hit me with the 2-hour piece, that's when I thought this was it. What if I go into surgery and this doesn't pan out well? Like, this sounds like it's going to be a major surgery. And so I told them, hey, look, I'll sign whatever paperwork. Let's get into surgery now. I am ready. And I called my wife. She had driven back home to Ocala from Tampa. And I called her. I said, hey, look, they got me going into surgery now. This is what happened. This is what happened. If you can, just make sure Brian is good and you can come back to the hospital whenever. And so I signed the paperwork. We got dressed. I got wiped down and they took me into surgery.
I'm really taken aback by how much had happened in such a short space of time in terms of getting your diagnosis and then the biopsy and then being hit with, if we don't sort this out, you could be dead within 2 hours. I mean, that must have been incredibly scary and difficult. With that short space of time in terms of making this decision to have the surgery and having the surgery, did you have time to process anything or was it just go, 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 get me in there?
Oh, as a transplant team that I'm a part of now, as they describe it, the cascading events of whatever, there wasn't much time to chew on. At that point, I knew that the kidney ruptured at the biopsy site. That's what the doctor said. It ruptured there. And because of the blood pressure that was trying to be controlled, the kidney tissue couldn't manage the openings or where they biopsied. It just kind of, the blood pressure was so high that it put pressure on where the biopsy had taken place and it burst at that site. And that's where the bleeding happened. And mind you, the heart is going to keep pumping blood throughout the body, even with the rupture. That's what caused the internal cavity to be so filled with so much blood. And the 2 hours dying, like my lab reports, they would run it every 4 hours. My hemoglobin was tanking fast. As a guy, they say we need about 15 to 30 hemoglobin. I was at 6 and 5, and I felt weak. I needed blood transfusions. I needed iron transfusion at that point. And so I started thinking about those things after the fact. But when they gave me that time frame, I said, let's go, let's go, let's go, like you said. And it was just a tunnel of everything. There was no time to sit and process. There was no, oh my gosh, I need to call folks and let them. It was just, I need to get this done now.
So, how was the recovery from the operation?
The recovery, well, the operation, as they said, was supposed to take about 2.5 hours. It ended up being like around 4 hours and change, because where the kidney ruptured was more so towards the upper portion, and it was so high up to reach to stop the bleeding there, that where they stopped the bleeding caused the upper portion of my left kidney to receive abnormal amount of blood, like it cut it off, and the bottom portion was still receiving blood. And so I got back into my room in recovery, and at the same time, my right kidney decided to start to hold in urine. So I started to become septic. They noticed that my ureter had obstructions, was in a tortuous position. And so with all the kinks and stuff up in there, urology came into the mix now, and they said, hey, look, we might need to bring you back into surgery. We're going to give you some time to rest, but just know tomorrow you're going to be back into surgery. And so I only rested for a little bit there. They gave me some pain meds. They got me situated and stable enough to get into surgery again. And that's when they did a cystoscopy and they inserted a renal stent, because their whole goal, and I think it's because I expressed my fear of going into dialysis and all of that stuff, their goal was to try to see if they can preserve as much as my kidney function as possible. Because at diagnosis at stage 4, I was diagnosed at 22 GFR. And by the time the kidney rupture, I was at 11. So I was stage 5. So they decided to bring me into surgery within 48 hours again. They put in the stent, and they just kind of sat back and watched. And luckily, and I stress luckily, because they took a risk with me. They told me this might work, this might not work, but we'll see. Put the stent, and my GFR slowly but surely went from 11 to 14 to then 17 to 18, and I was discharged at GFR of 19. So thankfully, I think they're quick thinking based on the anatomy and all that stuff. You know how doctors, they study all that fancy stuff. They looked at me as a classroom project, and they said, they literally called me a case study. They put the stent in, and the GFR went up. So that's what's been keeping me away from the machine, if you will, dialysis.
Wow. So, from your diagnosis to then having double surgery in a very short space of time, but the stent actually helped improve your kidney function. So you were now away from the danger zone of needing dialysis. Some good in a very bad situation.
Yeah, some very good. And I would say this too, it also restored my faith in good doctors. It helped me to see that there are some phenomenal folks out there who really truly care for their patients, versus a lot of folks is understanding that doctors are just in it for the, benefits, if you catch my drift. The doctors really cared. They came, they checked on me every so often. They made me feel like I was with family, to the point where I was taking pictures with them. I was, still bubbly, still cracking jokes with them. They were just as dumbfounded, because here I am in a crisis mode and I'm still trying to hold the joy. You know what I mean? And it was scary. That's one thing I could never take from that situation. Although I was smiling, I was terrified. Even though they did all of that, it didn't address the mass that was sitting in my right kidney. And that's something they were looking into as well. And it wasn't even over at that point. But I will say those double surgeries within 48 hours kind of restored everything. And of course, I was all hooked up, wires everywhere, blood coming here, iron coming from there, even to the point where I was on oxygen. It looked really bad. I remember my wife walking into the room, and I was sleeping. I was just sleeping because I had to, right? I didn't have the energy to be up. And she took a picture. And I always look back at that picture, and I would look at myself, and I look like I was so far gone. It breaks my heart. Here I am, just laid out on the bed, arms open, wires connected. It looks very bleak. Yeah, that's the first time I seen myself as helpless as possible. And I was in the mercy of some great doctors. And I think I would even say faith was just the catalyst to kind of pull me through. I'll even say house music too, because I'm a big fan of house music. I would crank it up and it just give me so much hope of getting out. My gosh, I would never want anybody to go through what I went through at that time, just because the raging emotions, the mystery of whether this is going to work out or not, the unknowns, if you will, was really strong. And I was in a really confused place, but I'm thankful it panned out the way it panned out at that time.
So rewinding slightly, in the surgery that you had on your kidney, did they remove the kidney or part of the kidney in terms of addressing the problem?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that they saw was that the kidney had not deteriorated. It was still receiving blood flow, but it hadn't rotten to the point where it was going to cause me adverse effects like infections and stuff like that. So their plan was to let's just keep it in there because it is receiving blood, although it's not kidneying or filtering rather. We're going to keep it in there just so that, for us to start cutting you up and removing, we're not going to go that far because you're still in a critical state. I was super weak. I was walking with a cane, and I don't think my body could have managed the removal of that kidney. So they decided, let's keep it in there and just let's see what happens. So luckily right now, it hasn't deteriorated. It's still receiving some blood flow, and it actually atrophied or shrunk. So that means the filtering effects of it's not even filtering. So they left it in there, but they were really zeroing in on that right kidney because they were super concerned because of what they saw in there. And all the surgeries, I'll say this. I remember waking up in the surgery one time and asking them, is everything all right? And it was like, yeah, you're good, Mr. Montes. Go back to sleep. So I don't know, man. I'm thankful that they did the double surgeries just to preserve my life and keeping the kidney there just so they can watch it. It just showed that they were studying my body at the same time. So I gave them something. They gave me something in return. Just in case if somebody has this again in the future, they know how to navigate it in some way, shape, or form.
In terms of the mass, did they finally find out what it was, make a plan in terms of removing the mass? What happened in terms of that?
They did find out. They found out and they had to prepare for it. So the next phase was to create a fistula, which I do have in my right arm, where the bend of my elbow is. The purpose of creating that fistula, although they figured he might be going into dialysis or not, they made the fistula just in case if we start poking and prodding at that kidney, if that kidney ruptures as well, I have a lifeline. My transplant surgeon, Heidi Pearson, she created a fistula, and it was time to schedule a robotic partial nephrectomy. Another massive surgery on top of, the stent, 3-month stent exchanges and stuff. So I met with urology. We did some scans. They looked at it, and they said, well, this mass resembles a tumor. It's like 3 centimeters, and it's past the threshold to where it's benign. And so we think it might be something a little bit more. And so we scheduled the robotic partial nephrectomy. And I have to tell you guys, robotic surgeries is no joke. I don't know the difference between a regular hand surgery versus robotic, but that machine, I know it has to keep your organs in place. So on my abdomen, there's so much scarring, but it's okay. It's good scarring. It tells a story though. So I do the robotic surgery and pathology report comes back as stage 1 renal cell carcinoma or kidney cancer with negative margins. That was a great news. Although it was a full-blown cancer cell, it was still great news because it was stage 1. And on top of that, it was negative margins. If you will, imagine the margins being like the tentacles, just an octopus. If the margins was positive and it was attached to the inside of the kidney, what else runs in the kidney? Blood is filtering all through there. So if it was pumping out cancer cells all through the blood that runs through that kidney, all those cells would have been traveling all over my body. And I believe at that point, it would have been super terminal. So the surgeon, he was able to remove the cancer cell, ended up removing an inch of my right kidney. So if you can imagine, I have essentially 3/4 of a kidney and still functioning and cracking jokes. So he removed an inch, he removed the whole cell intact, and it was time to heal. 12-week process of healing and just taking it easy. And when I got that diagnosis, it was like, okay, here it is. Malignant hypertension, CKD stage 4 baseline, and now stage 1 cancer. Like, how do I navigate this? And I did my first scan. There's no reoccurrence so far, so I have 4 more years left of scans to do to make sure there's no reoccurrence. But just being at my age of 36, so many diagnoses. I remember when I went back to see my primary care doctor, he was reading the medical notes because he was new to the facility. And before I met him, he was reading through the stuff. And he was like, oh my gosh, this person, he probably is not in the best shape. And here I am sitting with a little hat backwards, with a smile, just as strong as I can be. And he's looking at the papers and he's looking at me and he's like, are you Mondison? I was like, yep, that's me. I'm Mo. And then he's like, I wasn't expecting to see you as strong. And, it's like, well, but I'm here though. And every time I tell those portions of the story, people are just always like flabbergasted. But yeah, they removed the cancer cell. And now it's just navigating the more symptoms that come with all of that. And there was more that showed up too. If I can go into it, it's like the energy level is one thing. That's always been there. Then you have the stent now, which causes like, blood in the urine. And then you also have like the foaminess. You have the insomnia that comes now. Oh, and here's the big one. I talked about fluid retention. Yeah, so because I have a GFR of baseline of 25 to 32, I'm not filtering as much. So if I drink water or if I eat certain foods that have high water content, I will store that on top of storing waste, on top of storing all the toxins. So I had some fast weight put on. It's weird because my dry weight is 237 and I'm eating healthy. I'm eating my berries and stuff and drinking my little waters. And then I notice I go from 237 to 242, 242 becomes 245. And it just keeps climbing to like 268. And I'm like, where did this come from? And so it was just because I'm not able to filter out a lot of the things, my weight the water weight, if you will, or toxin weight just kind of crept up. So the new shirts that I bought, and I was like a medium, now I'm back to a large. And it's just like, no, I want to go back to that. But yeah. Kidney had cancer cell. I had a kidney that ruptured, and my ureter had so many obstructions in it to where like the fluid would back up.
I am totally taken aback by your story. Absolutely incredible. For someone going through one setback after setback after setback and thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to cope with this? What am I going to do? What advice do you have for them?
I would say that's heavy because I tell people all the time that a lot of the battles with CKD, while it's not visible, it's in the mind. The fight of CKD is definitely in the mind, as with any chronic illness, because you're thinking about your mortality. You're thinking about your life. You're thinking about legacy. You're thinking about things that you haven't done yet. I would say begin by advocating for yourself. Advocate for yourself in a way where people understand how you feel, because you get hit with you don't look too bad. And CKD is not something that you see. It's something you feel. You see it in your daily life. There's the spoon theory where you have a certain amount of spoons per day as a CKD patient, and you can run out of your spoons really fast. It's advocating that you might need some space and boundaries. You might need time to go see a doctor. And when you go see the doctor, it's advocating for yourself, letting them know the symptoms that you're seeing, not necessarily letting them dictate what they think you're feeling, but it's your body. Advocate for yourself in a way where you know that you're your best lawyer and you have to fight for yourself, especially if it means fighting against yourself for yourself, doing better for you, making sure that you're taking care of yourself. Advocacy can take on so many faces, but I think the fight for advocacy starts with ourselves.
I love that. I really do love that, especially when you said fighting against yourself for yourself. Sometimes that struggle, that journey, those challenges can really get to you and you're just like, you know what, forget it. I can't be bothered. I don't want to do this anymore. It's too much. And that is the point where you really have to fight yourself against yourself, because the reality is you want to be here. You want to live. You want to have a better life. And so, yeah, I really love that. You've got to fight against yourself for yourself. I really love that.
Yeah, you do. A lot of days it's not going to be perfect, because you're fighting so many different fronts, right? You're fighting the mental struggle, the mental health struggle part of it. I'll say this to that, the mental health part. You mentioned like it was the go, go, go. Surgery here, surgery there, this appointment, that appointment. You got to go see this specialist, that specialist. There was so much of a go, go, go. And now I like to call it, I'm in a quiet season to where it's not many big surgeries coming up, except for I got a stent exchange coming up in October. But there's not a lot of that hoorah, hoorah, go here, go there anymore. And so now that I'm in my quiet season, that's when my mind catches up with me. And so if you can imagine a year and a half of just going through the motions and doing this and doing that, now that I have time to sit down and just think, that's another fight that I have to face. Looking myself in the mirror and saying, what in the world just happened to me? And it's scary because any kind of thought can come in and you have to learn how to keep yourself grounded. You got to learn it's not over. There's hope. You have to remember there's people who care about you. I always talk about how when you have CKD, there is an isolation period. In the beginning, when the chaos is happening, everybody comes around, they rally around the flag. And then after a while, the phone starts to get quiet, the visitations get limited, and you're just like, wow, is the world moving on without me? I remember I was a social butterfly. I used to be here and there and just be around people and just loved it. Now, I get it. People have to go to work, or even people have things that they're dealing with too. But then that can become toxic because we have an inward look and we're just like, man, people need to be around me. But then we have to think people are human too. So that's a fight in and of itself, on top of the symptoms and all that other stuff. So CKD is a big caveat of fighting, and you can't do it alone. As far as like giving advice, I always tell people, hey, get plugged in with some folks who have CKD. That's one thing that I did. I got connected with a lot of folks who were struggling with CKD, and they've given me advice. They've been encouraging. Folks who've been on it for like 15 years, 20 years. They've really been helpful because I was looking for folks who've been in it to kind of help me walk through it. And I'm thankful that I met these folks.
It's invaluable. I love my kidney brothers and sisters because, like I said at the beginning, who feels it knows it. Been there, done that, worn the t-shirt. It really helps to know that you're not alone. And for anyone listening that is going through their struggle right now, I just want to say you're not alone. You are part of a community of warriors that, like Mo just said, reach out, speak to somebody. Don't struggle by yourself. So in terms of the future, did you make a plan in terms of transplantation? What's the plan going forward?
Oh, yeah. So again, the key players in this whole journey has been, of course, my wife, my nephrologist, the wonderful doctors at Tampa General, and even the incredible kidney fighters and kidney warriors out there who talk about how it's not over. You can get transplanted. You can do these things. Kind of encouraged me to kind of go that route. And so as far as the future is concerned, the hospital, Tampa General, that I'm with, they started me on the transplant program. I got into the classes. I learned about kidney scores rather. And so they got me inducted in. They ran tests so far. They have my blood culture, my kidney genome. And so they were just like, hey, look. And this is a scary part, or not scary, but more so difficult part. They told me two things. One, because of my GFR being above the 15 to 20 threshold, I can't be listed for a deceased donor because those are folks who are in renal failure. That's when you can be listed, here in the US at least, I would say. And at the same time, they discouraged me from getting a deceased donor because I'm so young. They always say that the deceased kidney can run you between 10 to 15 years, and then you'll probably be back either in dialysis or needing another transplant. So they strongly encourage trying to get a living donor. And so I'm like, boy, who's going to want to give up their kidneys? That's already a rock and a hard place right there. And because my GFR has been so up above the threshold, I won't take that for granted too. Again, they ran my tests, they got all my stuff in, and I just kind of been advocating or just making campaigns like, hey, anybody out there, if you feel inclined, I'm just trying to live, trying to see my son graduate, trying to be there for him as he becomes a man, or if I have a daughter or another son, trying to live those things. And I actually have a good friend who actually heard the call and reached out. And she got tested, and I got a call that said she matched 3 out of the 6 testing so far, so she might be a good candidate. I mean, she went through the ring with the testings, and she stayed updated with me. And for me, that meant so much because you're giving something that I didn't necessarily deserve and I wasn't born with, just to prolong my life because I didn't do the things, and I'll take full accountability. I could have done better, but you're giving me something that I didn't necessarily deserve for me to live. And I appreciate the heart of anybody who donates because you're doing something so beyond yourself just to see somebody else live. It's poetry in life, laying down your life for a friend or giving up something so that they can live. So I truly appreciate it. It's something that I didn't even expect. The way I got the call or how she wanted to donate to me, that's a whole nother thing. It was a beautiful surprise during Christmas. So now you're going to talk about that. But she recently actually got approved for donation by the transplant board this past Friday. So right now, as far as transplanting goes, it's just waiting for my end of the board to be approved, and then we schedule surgery. So it seems as if it's just the race between dialysis and transplant.
So 3 things there, really. The first, just to reassure people listening, deceased donation kidneys can last any amounts of time. I've interviewed people, had very successful deceased kidney donations that have lasted 20 years plus. So we never know. Everyone's different. So I just want to reassure anyone listening, please don't worry. The second thing I want to say is living donation. I always call living donors superheroes because they really are. Like you said, being willing to give that special gift, that special part of yourself to help someone live is just so admirable. And I just want to take the time to acknowledge and thank all living donors out there. Thank you for your sacrifice. Sometimes people donate to a complete stranger that they don't even know. Sometimes it's a family member. In your case, it's a friend. I just want to take the time to acknowledge all living donors. You are superheroes. Thank you so much for your sacrifice. And the third point I wanted to make is I really don't want to hear you blaming yourself because at the end of the day, and for anyone listening as well, this journey is hard enough without carrying that guilt. So I just want to ultimately, as the saying goes, when you don't know, you don't know. And when you don't know, you can't do any better. But when you do know better, do better. And that is the advice that I really want to share.
I'll even add, just acknowledging those fights. Because, like you said, you don't want to say those things. You don't want to blame yourself because you didn't know. But then those thoughts, they do creep up on you and you have to make sure you take control of your mind. And to the point of the deceased donors, I'll say, I was actually talking with someone the other day who had one that lasted 21 years. And those numbers, I feel like they don't know ultimately. And so they just throw stuff out. But then I feel like if you do everything that you're supposed to post-transplant and you really take care of yourself, it can go on for the rest of your life. I don't think there's a distinction. The organ is going to do what it's supposed to do until whenever. We don't know. So we give thanks for everybody who has an organ that runs for a long time. We need it. And you guys who donate, like she said, you guys are superheroes. We give thanks for you guys.
I know that you're very active on social media. What are your handles so that people can give you a follow?
I am currently on Instagram at Mr. Cool Beans 2889. And you can also find me on TikTok as Mr. Cool Beans.
And as always, I will put the links to Mo's social media in the description box. So do support, do follow him. So today, Mo, you've shared your Kidney Warrior story, your journey with CKD, from your diagnosis to overcoming challenge after challenge to the point now that you're going through the workup process for living donation. So the expression that I have is hands together for you, that everything goes well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What is your final word of encouragement for the listeners?
Stay strong and solid as best as you can. It's not always going to be perfect, but just remember that you have loved ones, you have friends who are rallying behind you. Even if they're not related to you, we're all kidney families. And advocate for yourself. Be your best advocate. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for the advice that you shared. I know that you're going to help so many people out there by sharing your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love this platform. This is phenomenal. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to Diary of a Kidney Warrior podcast. I truly appreciate your support. New episodes of this podcast are released every other Monday, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you found this episode helpful, why not share it with someone who might benefit too? To stay up to date with the latest episodes, news and resources, sign up for the email mailing list and join the WhatsApp channel. All the details are in the episode description. Until next time, take care and choose to live.